About 2 weeks ago, my girlfriend came over for some Netflix and chill. After a while, we got hungry and decided to order pizza. I picked up my phone and called the Domino's pizza joint not too far from my apartment. It rang once before a guy picked up. "Domino's Pizza, may I take your order, please?" he emphatically belched. He pretty much sounded like one of those hyper-telemarketers. "Yeah, I'll have 2 large pizzas with some extra onion rings on top," I responded. "Noted, sir. Your order will be delivered shortly." It wasn't the first time I was ordering pizza from them, so I didn't doubt the assurance he gave. "Sure, thanks, bro," I said before ending the call. We were hopeful the pizza would arrive within 30 minutes, but after 4 long, gut-wrenching hours, it still hadn't arrived. My girlfriend got tired of waiting and decided to leave. I was then left alone in the apartment to possibly die of starvation. A few minutes after my girlfriend left, I heard 3 firm knocks on the door. I thought she might have forgotten something, so I briskly walked to the door to open it. But as the door swung open, I was shocked. It wasn't the face of my girlfriend staring back at me. It was the face of some disturbing-looking dude with raggedy hair and bloodshot eyes. His eyes were sunken, and the bags around them were massive. He even looked tattered, and he may or may not have had a blood stain on his shirt now that I think about it. Of course, at the moment I wasn't really paying attention to all those extra details. The only things that stood out for me were the Domino's branded shirt he had on and the box of pizzas in his hand. "What the hell, dude? I've been waiting for this thing for hours," I snapped at him. He didn't say a word. He just stood there with a blank expression on his face, his head slightly tilted to the left for some reason. I would have assumed he was high, but I couldn't smell a drop of alcohol or weed on him. I at least expected to hear an apology or something, but none was tendered. "You know what, Richard?" I peered closer at the name tag pinned to his chest. "Bradson, I'll take this up with your manager. Give me that." Grudgingly, I pulled the boxes of pizza out of his hand. If it wasn't for the fact that my stomach was rumbling like an earthquake, my ego probably wouldn't have let me take the pizza. I gave him the stink eye before slamming the door in his face. It was already after dark, but at least I finally had something to eat. I laid back on the couch and got ready to dig in. But as I flipped one of the boxes open, I met another shocker. One of the pizza slices had a huge chunk bitten out of it. I was livid. I felt like breaking a baseball bat over that guy's head or running him over with a car. But fortunately for the guy, I lacked the energy to perform any of those feats. I dropped the pizza back on the table and grabbed my phone instead. I called the Domino's restaurant again, but unlike before, I didn't get a speedy response. The call rang about 5 or 6 times before I finally got an answer. "Hello, this is Domino's. How may I help you?" This time, the voice on the other side sounded more mature and calm. "Yeah, can you please transfer me to the manager? I'd like to speak to him about my order and the delivery service I received." "I'm the manager. What's the problem?" the man asked. "My pizza was delivered 4 hours late, and it looked like some douchebag had eaten out of it." "Oh, that's terrible. Did you get the name of your delivery guy?" the manager asked. "Yes, his name was Richard Bradson." The line suddenly went cold. I could hear him breathing on the other side, but he wasn't saying anything. "Hello, are you still there?" I asked. Yeah, I'm here. His voice abruptly began to sound jittery and nervous. I could immediately tell something was wrong. "When did you receive this delivery?" the manager asked. "At about 8:27 p.m. this evening," I responded. The line went cold again. I was tempted to ask if there was a problem, but I just decided to wait for his response. I grabbed a piece of pizza so I could calm my raging stomach while I waited. Eventually, he responded with a stern tone. "I'm afraid that's impossible, son. Richard Bradson is dead." Instantly, I felt a cold chill run down my spine. Maybe he was playing a prank or just trying to pull my leg, I wondered. That's ridiculous. I just saw him like 3 minutes ago. I don't know what to tell you, son, but it's all over the news. You can go see for yourself. He died in a freak car accident earlier this afternoon. He had never missed an order up until today. It's just tragic, really. While the manager was still speaking, I slowly lowered my phone onto the couch and tuned to the news channel. I was left completely horror-stricken by the first frame. Pictures of the same guy who was standing in front of my door minutes ago were all over the news. He and 3 others were involved in a crash. He had been declared deceased. I felt like I was losing my mind. I jolted off the couch and dashed to the lobby, but there was no trace of him. I even ran out into the cold, dark street, but he was gone. I walked back to my apartment, bolted the doors, and just sat on my couch. I tried to make sense of the entire evening, but nothing made sense. When I was 19, I worked for a small-town pizza delivery company near my house. I worked there as a means to save up money while I was in college. I lived with my parents, so I didn't have many expenses. I was able to live fairly frugally and save around 80% of my money, which was nice. After a couple of months of working there, the manager quickly gave me a promotion. He really liked my work ethic, but of course, with a raise comes more responsibility. Instead of just making the pizza, I was now responsible for picking up the phone, sometimes doing dishes, and even delivering the pizza myself. I actually enjoyed delivering pizza. That was my favorite part of my job because it barely felt like I was working. Most nights I would walk away with $75 or more in tips, plus my $12 an hour wage, which wasn't horrible for the time being. I enjoyed driving around and listening to music while doing my deliveries. I've always known it was a somewhat dangerous job, especially delivering at night in unfamiliar areas, either in a rough part of town or in the middle of nowhere sometimes. Unfortunately, you also run into the non-tippers or people that try to make your life a living hell. I was pretty stoic, though, and I was very good at keeping my composure when things like this would happen. However, this night in particular was something else and caught me off guard completely. There was a man that would call our restaurant every so often, and he would always say something weird but then hang up right after. Sort of like a prank call. One time he said he was going to bang my mom, and another time he asked me how my skin tasted. We always knew it was him because of the caller ID, but we weren't allowed to block him. Company etiquette, I guess. Eventually, I just stopped answering his calls altogether. After some time, he stopped calling, thankfully. But he called again months later, and I picked up the phone right away. I recognized his voice and realized who I was talking to. Except this time, he said he actually wanted a pizza, and he wasn't being weird like usual. He even apologized to me and said that he wouldn't do it again and that he just wanted a pizza, fair and square. He even said that he would tip the driver we send out $30 in an effort to apologize. Unfortunately, I wasn't really allowed to say no to a customer. My manager wasn't there. He had just left a few minutes before, and I wasn't going to send one of the teenagers out there in the middle of the night to deal with this creepy guy. So, I decided to do it myself. I didn't think anything would happen to me, and I thought I could hold my ground. I took his order and wrote down his address. When the pizza was done, I stepped in my car and off I was to his house. The closer I got, the more I realized that maybe this wasn't a great situation to be in. I got this sinking feeling inside that felt like despair. It was about a 12-minute drive or so, which wasn't too far, but it was, however, right on the county line. If it had been another mile away, it would have been out of our delivery range. I knew I had to deliver this pizza, and it was too late to turn around. I turned onto the dirt road, and before I could fully realize what I was getting myself into, I was at the house. I stopped and stared at the creepy, tall, white house for a minute. It was pitch black, with not a single person in sight nor a sign of life at all. I got out of my car, and when my headlights shut off, I could barely see anything in front of me. I thought about leaving the pizza on the porch, but I knew that wasn't proper and could look bad on the company. Plus, I remembered the $30 tip that he promised. Before I even knocked, the door swung open and creaked the whole way. It was a bald man, middle-aged, probably around 40 or so. "Hey, Josh, nice to finally meet you," the man said. How did he know my name? I stopped and stared, then realized he probably read my name tag on my shirt. Still, it was extremely creepy given the circumstances. "Your total is $23.22, sir." He looked at me for a prolonged period of time with a creepy smile on his face before saying, "Okay." That was all he said. I was waiting for him to hand me the money, but he was just looking at me with his soulless eyes. Then, that was when he said one of the most uncomforting things that anyone has ever said to me. "Has anyone ever tried to hurt you before, while doing these deliveries?" he asked. I looked at him with confusion and said, "No, what do you mean?" "Oh, nothing," he exclaimed. "I just wondered. There are a lot of weirdos out here, so you never know." His grin became wider, like his devilish plan was about to unfold. I got a surge of energy and paranoia that bolted from my chest, and I told him that I had to leave. Before getting my tip or even giving him his change, I ran to my car, and just then, I heard footsteps to my right, approaching me from the distance in the darkness. Luckily, I was faster than them, and I made it to my car safely. I looked behind me as I slammed my door shut and turned the car on. There were two grown men standing right in front of my car, and one of them had a baseball bat in his hands. They both had ski masks on. I beelined out of there and never looked back. As I was backing out, I ran over a man that I hadn't seen yet, who was also wearing a mask. I have no idea if he lived or not. Maybe I committed manslaughter that night. I'll never really know. Nobody at the restaurant believed me about this story besides one of my good friends, Jimmy. So I ended up quitting a few days later. When I got home that night and told my parents, we called the police. But those people were gone, and the house was vacant. I genuinely believe whoever those people were planning on murdering me, or worse. I don't even want to think about what's worse than that. But selling my organs on the black market isn't completely out of the question now, is it? I remember one of the most traumatizing moments of my life like it was yesterday. It all started on a normal Saturday. I worked as a pizza delivery driver for just shy of 2 years, but I quit the very same night all of this happened. As a teenager, my friends and I used to be those neighborhood degenerate kids that every neighbor would hate to have. I'm only barely being harsh on myself because it's the truth. Sometimes, we would ding-dong ditch the houses a few streets over, and sometimes we would do the same house more than once on the same night, just to see if we could get a better reaction. Well, there was a man named Mr. Johnson. He knew most of us kids, and wasn't very fond of us. He knew what we were up to in the neighborhood, probably the same things he was up to as a young boy as well. I'm sure he thought we were the ones knocking on his door all those nights, but he really didn't have the proof, so things were always forced to stay civil between us. I always wondered if he had a hunch we messed with him multiple weekends that summer, and never got caught. Fast forward to September of the same year. I was working my usual night shift delivering pizzas when I got an order for a simple cheese pizza. I noticed that it was on the same street as my parents and in the same neighborhood. What I had no clue about was that the order was for Mr. Johnson's house. It wasn't until I was halfway down the street that I realized who the order was for. The name was under Mark, which had to be Mr. Johnson's first name, I assumed. I swallowed my pride and hoped he wouldn't recognize me. I knocked on the door and waited, with every second feeling like time was standing still. Finally, the door swung open in an instant. Mr. Johnson was towering over me, and I got a huge whiff of what his house smelled like. There was a very off-putting smell coming from that house. It smelled like garbage. "Hello," he said, with a creepy smile rubbing off his face. He took a step closer and hunched over to whisper something in my ear. I could now smell his breath, which smelled like rotten eggs and stale cigarettes. "If you ever come back here, I will kill you," he said. "The same thing goes for your stupid little friends." Then, he patted me on the back and gave me a $50 bill, which covered the pizza and added a generous tip. I didn't say anything. Our eyes locked together, and I think he got the hint that I understood him loud and clear. After I got in my car, Mr. Johnson was standing right where I last saw him, staring me down. I bolted out of there, but not before noticing him lifting his shirt up, which revealed a gun tucked in his pants. He then pointed at me with his hand in the shape of a fake gun, pretended to shoot me, and started laughing. I was too nervous to tell my friends about what happened, as they would probably make fun of me for being scared. I knew that would only make them want to mess with him more. And I was right. because a few weeks later I ended up telling them. We were all hanging out when they decided it was time to go out and egg some houses, including Mr. Johnson's. I was worried about all of our safety, so I had to tell them. I ended up getting into a huge argument with my friends, and they sort of laughed at me and called me a coward, just like I thought they would. But they don't understand the seriousness of this man, and neither do any of you listening. He was a very scary man, and he was a lot bigger up close. He had some muscle on him, and he looked like a neo-Nazi, a man that doesn't mess around, let me put it that way. I didn't want to find out, so I stayed home that night, and I stayed in any other time after that. Since my friends keep messing with Mr. Johnson, I'm just worried that he's going to think I have a part in it. I don't go outside by myself very often in my own neighborhood because I'm worried I will run into him. I told my parents, and they said I deserved it for being a dumbass, which might be partially true, but I don't think I deserve to die. Although I feel guilty for what I did, I like my life and would like to continue living it. Maybe I'm the lucky one for getting out when I did. I was unemployed and desperate. My fiancée was sick and we had just had a newborn. It was up to me to bring in the money we needed badly. I had a good job at General Motors, getting paid quite well, but I was laid off and eventually fired completely. I searched and searched for any job that would hire me, and after a couple of days of walking into every restaurant in town, I got myself an interview. It was at a small local pizza place in the town I grew up in. I loved this place growing up, so it was going to be cool to see how the food was made after all these years. They needed a driver, and I, of course, accepted. I got the hang of everything quickly, as the job really is as simple as it sounds. I didn't even have to make the food, unlike what I expected. My one and only job was to take the pizza to the customers and keep a polite mannerism while doing so. The money obviously wasn't great, but it paid the bills, which was the most important part. I worked there for maybe 5 months, and nothing bad really happened until the last week that I worked there. I put in my 2 weeks after this incident and ended up leaving before the 2 weeks were even up. I got an order for a pizza, and just like normal, I got in my car and headed that way. Up until this point, the worst thing about being a pizza delivery driver for me, the only horrific thing to happen, if you even want to call it that, was when a customer didn't tip. This happened at least twice a night on average. I would deliver about 10 or so pizzas a night, and there was always that one guy or grouchy woman who wouldn't tip. It sucked, but it was just part of the job. I'm pretty sure what I experienced this night was far more horrific than a mean troll of a woman not tipping every once in a while. The house was in a rural area, which definitely added a sprout of creepiness but also curiosity. I pulled into the driveway, but I couldn't see the house. There were trees all in the front yard, and I was starting to get nervous. It doesn't sound scary, but I've heard horror stories that start out like this before. And little did I know I was about to become one of those stories. I crept up the driveway until I saw the front porch. I stopped the car immediately and walked up there quickly but also quietly. I knocked on the door and noticed, after waiting for a minute, there was a piece of paper with tape on it on the ground that looked like it may have fallen from the door. There was $40 taped to the back of it. The note said, "Please bring the pizza inside. Just set it right in front of the door." That's when I really started feeling queasy. I really did not want to do that, so I set the pizza down on the porch and went back to my car. I wish I would have just left like I was planning to, but I felt guilty for not doing what the note asked. So, after debating with the devil and the angel on my shoulder for probably 5 minutes, I hustled out of the car and back up to the porch. I opened the front door and set the pizza down quickly. "Hello? Anyone there? Pizza's here." Nobody answered, but I heard something that spooked me, so I ran away. I went to close the door on my way out, but I left it cracked open by accident. Then a man came trampling outside a few seconds too late. He was wearing all black clothing and a creepy old man mask. He had a large, shiny object in his hand, which I assumed was a knife. I drove out of there as fast as I could, and my heart was beating through my chest. I had just escaped being murdered by only a few seconds. "Okay, great. That just happened," I said to myself. I couldn't believe it. All those horror stories you hear growing up, and eventually, Something like it happens to you. It felt like the world was ending, even though I knew I was safe. I kept having nightmares about that night. In my dreams, when I was driving away from him, he would chase me down, ram me off the road, and then ultimately, it usually ended with him murdering me. This evil man has never been found, as far as I know. Of course, I called the police, but nobody owns that house, just like we all expected. I was almost the victim of a horrifying trap. Always listen to your gut.